Welcome to the October episode of Integration Television. I am your host, Robin Smith, and on today's show we're going to be talking about supply chain optimization with Andy Davies of the DWG group in Atlanta, Georgia. But prior to getting to our feature interview, I've got to bring you up to date on some interesting articles and some news that we've come across. We've had some great feedback on our Twitter feed at VL Integration TV. Keep those comments coming and keep the questions coming because they're providing us with some phenomenal input. So before getting into our feature interview, I just want to go through the news today and talk about three really interesting reports that we have come across or have been sent to us by viewers. One of the things that you're going to hear about in the show in the future, and you're going to hear about in the market today, is the social supply chain. We're going to have a show in the new year, early in the new year, on the social supply chain, and I think you're going to find this very interesting. Of the documents that were sent to us, we have three. I'm going to start with a first document. Actually, it's a report. It's an e-book that was put together by the Ontario government, and it's how you can profit from e-business. It's a really interesting booklet designed for small business owners and entrepreneurs who are looking at e-business in its entirety. And there's some really interesting suggestions, some business models, some of the stuff we've talked about in our blog about planning, looking forward or looking to the future for your growth and making sure that what you're doing from an IT and an integration perspective matches where you see your growth going. So this particular booklet is free, and it can be downloaded from the Ontario Government Industry website, and we'll post that link to on Integration Television. Our second report, which is again quite interesting, and all these reports that we're talking about today are all free, so you can download them. They're all readily available on the internet. Is the second report is Gartner's top predictions for IT organizations and users 2011 and beyond. It's really a summary of where Gartner sees IT going up to about 2015. But in that report, there is some very interesting stuff. One of the very interesting predictors for me in here is Gartner is predicting that by 2015, approximately 25% of labor hours associated with IT services will be eliminated with automation. And what that tells me is that integration is going to become a bigger and bigger issue. So take a look at that. You have to register with Gartner to get this summary report, but it is free. And again, we will post the link on the Integration Television website for this. The final report is a report from Deloitte Canada called Tech Trends 2011, the natural convergence of business and IT. And this is a recent report that Deloitte have just put out, and it's actually quite interesting. It's quite extensive, talks about a whole variety of areas of IT and integration. But in the document, there's a discussion on visualization, and in particular data visualization. And this is something that's very dear to our heart at Virtual Logistics and at Integration Television, because we feel that data visualization is going to become increasingly more important in organizations, and particularly as we go forward and we start looking at things like the social supply chain, where we're going to be bringing data in from a variety of sources. The need to integrate that data is going to become very, very important. And one of the things that they talk about in this report from Deloitte under the technology implications of visualization of integration, and they speak specifically to the ability to link multiple internal and increasingly external data sources into a palette of information that needs to be visualized. So this underlies this whole area of integration as it relates to bringing other sources in. So if any of you have come across other reports related to this, these three are free, and we will post the links as I'd indicated. Send me the feedback to our Twitter feed or post some feedback on our Facebook page, because we think that this kind of information and getting this information out is going to be very, very useful. So enough of the news, enough of the dry report, so to speak. We have next our feature interview with Andy Davies, and Andy Davies is going to be joining me over the phone. It'll be a phone interview, and I'll be talking to Andy Davies about supply chain optimization and the things that his group at DWG have done with Flextronics. And they've taken a very interesting, a very different approach, one that is that really speaks to a more collaborative platform. So, feature interview next. Hi, Robin Smith here today, and welcome to our second episode of Integration Television. I've got Andy Davies here from the DWG group in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're going to talk today about supply chain optimization and why supply chain optimization is so critically important to the efficient functioning and the efficient movement of goods and services. So Andy, welcome to the show. We're really excited to have you here. And what I'd like you to do is just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the DWG group and how you ended up in Atlanta, Georgia, and so on.
Absolutely. Well, good afternoon, Robin. It's good talking to you again. Appreciate the opportunity to participate in Integration TV, very exciting program you developed here. So to everybody listening, I'm Andy Davies. I'm in charge of sales and partner development over at DWG. As you can tell by the accent, not a local southern boy.
Yeah.
But been here 10 years. So I came originally from Northampton in the United Kingdom, just about 70 miles north of London. And my background, which brought me here, was actually in demand and supply chain planning, working for a company called Mercia Software, which eventually got acquired by a company like Infor. It's probably people know is an ERP and supply chain management company, and so a strong background in supply chain management, ERP, and all those programs that everybody's trying to manage and improve in their strategies.
For sure, excellent. So you have to tell me about the genesis then of the whole DWG, because if you were with Infor and clearly working at that level in terms of ERP and supply chain, what led you to create your own firm and to move into a completely different non-corporate type of direction?
It's an interesting question, Robin. I appreciate it. Well, a little bit of background first of all on DWG then. Just so everybody knows, we are not a technology company. We are essentially a business and technology consulting organization. So we don't actually own any technology. We don't intend to develop any of our own IP at all. This is not part of the development of our organization. And in fact, we don't even sell or even implement any technology solutions either. And there's many reasons for that. And it actually stems really from our experience in technology organizations and some of the programs that we've rolled out when being a technology organization.
Interesting.
So what we've developed here as a consulting organization, we've actually tried to develop a consulting product that can really help large enterprise organizations improve their supply chain strategies and optimization beyond their four walls. I think every organization always has a strategy of improving their own internal operations, rolling out standardization of ERP systems, supply chain management, inventory optimization, demand planning, and sales and operations planning, etc., etc. And everybody focuses in on their own business operations, including subsidiary operations, remote sales, marketing offices, remote manufacturing facilities. But at some point, that overall strategy needs to be extended, we believe, beyond the four walls. So they need to start looking at how can we actually now improve our operations with our other trading partners, both down at the customer level, if they're in maybe a manufacturing environment, supporting maybe OEM customers, and also on the supply side, the inbound movement of goods and services into the organization.
Sure.
So we develop products to support that.
Interesting. So in terms of supply chain optimization, because you raise a very interesting point here, where organizations tend to focus on efficiencies at more of the silo level, whereas when you look at the supply chain, you really need to look at the flow of goods and services between the supply side and the purchase side, and how those goods and services are going to be used internally. There's actually some interesting statistics that I was able to uncover before, and I'm sure that you can probably share some more with us. But Forrester in March of 2010 put out a document which was a survey of B2B practices, and one of the interesting things that came out of that was that the improvement of supply chain relationships between trading partners was something that somewhere on the order of about 50% of companies were placing a high emphasis on that. So clearly what this number reflects to me is that there's a weakness not only in the strategies that are out there today in terms of the way that we onboard trading partners, which, and I'm not going to name any names here because, this is not really the objective, but it tends to be a rather adversarial approach where companies will go out, they'll take the big stick and the supply chain has to pay to be onboarded. So that in and of itself creates a negative sort of a tone to things. But also I think that big companies are starting to realize that the weaknesses in the supply chain are really affecting the way that they perform and the value add downstream that they're able to bring to their customers. So it'd be interesting to see how, from your own experience, is this something that you've seen, and particularly working with the clients that you've got, does that 50% number make sense?
It does, and you bring up some very interesting points, Robin, and I can talk directly to my experience outside of DWG, working in those environments where you just described, where something is kind of mandated or it's a single solution of one size fits all.
Yeah.
So with the involvement of what we actually call a Certified Technology Program, or CTP, which is one of our consulting programs.
Okay.
So just an example, I actually worked once with a large manufacturer who decided they wanted to promote the use and adoption of a mid-size ERP solution, and we built for them a B2B connection integration product from that ERP back into their back office systems as well, with the objective of working with their trading partners, their suppliers, and saying, based upon these requirements, we'd like you to adopt an ERP solution to improve your business operations, which obviously has great improvements in cost, quality,
Sure.
down the supply chain.
Yeah.
And with that is delivered an integrated a B2B platform for free, essentially. From that perspective, they just had to buy the ERP. Well, that one size fits all, and that program was tied very much to a single provider, fell apart purely due to the acquisition of that company by a large organization that then actually shut down those operations of the small organization that acquired, which meant this program that had been invested in heavily by the large manufacturer no longer existed.
So the new company coming in that was acquiring the smaller company really didn't have any interest in this kind of an approach.
Exactly.
And now all of a sudden the big company, or the supplier that has chosen them, is now all of a sudden in a situation where their whole supply chain is now being affected.
Absolutely.
So do you see in that single solution type approach where, and I know in the EDI world, this is notorious, where the retailer or the hub will come along with a big stick and say, thou shalt, and thou shalt test with, and thou shalt, and and then there's this very aggressive sales cycle around this. From your experience and the experience that you just highlighted, how does that affect the supplier base to that big hub?
Essentially, in my experience, when those programs are rolled out, first of all, you start to outsource your relationship with your trading partners. You start to give control to an outside vendor who has really only one key interest, and that is to sell their products and services to your trading partners.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they're mostly rolled out via a mandate. So those suppliers are then really instructed, you must adopt this technology in order to remain as a supplier to us as, with your large customers. And
For sure.
that's to make that relationship break down. And it's that one-size-fits-all approach with a mandate and kind of the outsourcing of your relationship. But it also, it's also addressing only the value to the key customer. So, the key hub, the large enterprise,
Yep.
is mandating it. If you've ever seen some of those letters that are sent out to the supplier introducing them to these programs, you will never see a benefit addressing the needs of the supplier.
Correct. No, and that's a very interesting point that you raise, because and I've seen lots of these sort of mandates, whether they come in a form of a letter or they come in an email with a big stick, and but you're absolutely right. There is no attention to what the supplier really should be doing and what's good for the supplier.
Exactly.
So how does your approach and the kinds of things that you're doing? I'm sure that within the genesis of your CTP, which you'll have to tell me what that actually means. It's a certified.
It's a certified technology program.
Okay.
So I'm shortened to CTP. So let me address that question. A certified technology program is there to really help any large organization roll out any supply programs they need to. One of the key initiatives for most people is B2B integration.
Yeah.
I'm going to be sharing purchase orders, invoices, advanced shipment notifications, forecast response, inventory planning information with my trading partners. And so B2B integration is a key topic within a certified technology program. But it can actually be used also to roll out supply chain management solutions, or in many cases a multi-tier ERP program as well, which is a pretty common subject with SAP these days as well, with their by design solution.
Yeah. Okay.
But what we do is we will actually take a completely different approach to anybody else in the market right now, where we are essentially the objective advisor. We'll go in and actually talk to the large enterprise and say, what are your initiatives for working with the trading community? We'll even do some level of segmentation of their trading community as well, to understand what the requirements are of their supplier base and customer base too.
See, that to me is very interesting, because that comes back to what we were just talking about earlier about the one size fits all. Is that I'm sure that within any supply chain you're going to have suppliers of varying sizes. You're going to have the Fortune 1000, the Fortune 5000. You may have the small guy, the mom and pop shop that's working at a home that's got a specific product. So having that ability to diversify the solutions, to me, I think is quite interesting, and it sort of turns the whole notion of thou shalt comply on its ear. Really, it's
What we'll actually do in that case is we'll understand and document those requirements, and then we take that to the next level, where we will actually go out and assess certain solution vendors for let's use B2B integration providers.
Okay.
I will actually assess the providers in the market and look at their capabilities from both a company as a whole, from financial viability, whether they're likely to be acquiring or being acquired, to also then looking at their solution capability and footprint, and how it fits to the large enterprise community that we're talking to.
okay.
And then we'll actually certify those providers and their solutions. And we won't certify all their solutions. We'll sometimes certify just a single solution. And then we may go to another provider and certify an alternative solution, with the goal of ending up with a portfolio of products and services that are then available to that community. And we will try our best to pre-negotiate pricing for those trading partners as well. Because remember, when you are a smaller company, you often think you're unaware sometimes as to whether you're getting the best deal.
No, and that's very true, because many people, and I've seen it myself in the retail space, what they'll do is they will discard the notice from the hub, and they'll sit on it, and either because they don't understand really the implications, or they're too busy running around, or and then when push comes to shove, it's here's the last letter, final, drop dead, and everything now is decided on the basis of price, which tells me that they really have no data integration strategy across the board. But more importantly, they don't understand why this technology is being, or this integration approach is being presented to them as a supplier. What's the value here to the hub? What's the value to them? And then what are the solutions that fit? So I think that fits with what you're talking about in terms of being able to have multiple solutions. Because I've seen it myself. A web portal doesn't necessarily do for somebody that's got huge volumes, but it may be good for somebody that may get 1 or 2 POs a month.
Absolutely, and also we all know price is important, and especially to a mom and pop size supplier, they're going to be looking for something which is a reasonably priced solution to achieve what they want to achieve, and so a web EDI solution may be sufficient for them, but it may be that also in some parts of the world where the supply community extends to, maybe there are connectivity issues, and maybe therefore an on-premise solution is a better requirement.
Correct.
Is
Yeah.
a fully managed service offering a viable solution for other suppliers as well? What's their growth strategies for their business? Do they want to invest in something that will just support them today, or do they need to make an investment for the future?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
it's important to put in different platform options, different pricing options to meet the requirements of everybody within that community.
Yeah.
You can't do that with a one-size-fits-all. But also to your other point, Robin, that you raised there was that what is the value? And I think that's the most important thing that we try to do, is we will work with that hub and say to them, look, you can't just talk to your suppliers about the value of, let's say, EDI. Yes, we need to address it. But what's the value of them doing EDI with you? And is that maybe a reduced payment terms,
Yeah.
60 days or 30 days? Can they extend their business with you and supply more sites? Will you introduce them to more contracts with your OEM customers potentially? What are the offerings to them? Is their supplier rating going to go up?
Yeah.
And the benefits associated to that. So we really work at that level and say, there's actually, what we come down to is there's 3 real benefits from going through the CTP model. And that's going to be, let's say, the EDI benefits as a whole, lead time reductions, cost reductions, improved data integrity, etc., inventory reductions. And then there's obviously the benefits of doing EDI with that hub.
Yeah.
We also try to bring CTP benefits, and that is things such as the pre-negotiated pricing, the reduced solution offerings, so that we've kind of done the RFP up front for them, so they haven't got to look at all the 260 EDI providers in North America. They've kind of got a subset already being performed for them, so they go a lot of pain in that process.
Yeah, to me that's very interesting what you're saying, because it almost it is almost telling me that really a supplier should be asking those hard questions of their hub, saying, okay, what are the benefits for me? How does this work for me long term? And then what are the kinds of vetting and solutions that you're going to be providing me so that I can make an educated decision? I may have a system that I may leverage in, but I may be new to the game and I may not have anything there. So I think that's a very interesting approach. It's one that's very different, as I had mentioned earlier, from that adversarial approach. So do you see this as something that this approach is one that's gaining traction? Do you have any examples you could give us of?
Absolutely, and I think you bring up some really important points here, Robin. And then this is an opportunity for all those large enterprise hubs to be proactive in giving these benefits to their suppliers, because you got to remember that when a supplier asks those questions directly on a hub, who are they asking?
Yeah.
Because often their contact doesn't have those answers.
Correct.
So being proactive and putting a model in place and a program in place to achieve this, you're giving those answers to those suppliers that are asking those questions immediately, and you're not relying upon sometimes commodity managers who don't really understand the value of EDI. So
No.
different ways. So there is a lot of traction in this area. I think people are getting a little bit of heartburn, let's say, with the
Some Gravol, please.
Yeah. So we've got some interesting examples One of my favorite examples is a very large program we're rolling out with Flextronics.
Okay, interesting.
Those people that don't know Flextronics, you think of them as the brand behind the electronics brands that you do know.
Okay.
And that's an important point that I want to make there, because Flextronics are an electronics manufacturing service provider, or essentially a contract manufacturer to people like Dell or Intel or Cisco, Citrix, or
Okay.
names we all know, and many other brand names that we're not that familiar with yet, even electronic motorcycle manufacturers.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's a very interesting company. About a $30 billion annual revenue organization, global supply chain, about 70 plus manufacturing sites, thousands upon thousands of global suppliers, and hundreds of OEM customers.
So some real challenges there in bringing people on board.
I mean, think about that as a supply chain model there. So really getting back to supply chain optimization, Flextronics have won many awards for their I guess leadership and thought leadership around the adoption of technology.
Okay.
And they've obviously rolled out, standardized, I say, on ERP globally, and they've still got a few leftover ERPs that they need to get rid of as part of their overall strategy. But that's down to acquisitions. And we call out some of these names because they are known. So they're using BARM as their, or Infor ERP as their standardization there. They've got other things like Connexus and Cirrus for sales and operations planning and inventory optimization, and many other systems in place there as well. So they've spent millions upon millions, probably spend millions every year on their own IT infrastructure to improve their own processes, and have focused heavily on lean manufacturing and lean processes as well. But their supply chain has broken down in the areas of maybe an order to cash model on the OEM customer side, where customers have actually put their ERP terminals onto the manufacturing shop floor.
Interesting.
Rather than truly outsourcing that manufacturing process, they're really just outsourcing the labor and giving Flextronics access to those systems.
So, if I understand you correctly, really what you're saying is that there's a level of integration here that goes beyond just the trading of electronic documents. It's similar to somebody in the retail space who's doing outsourced design and outsourced manufacturing on behalf of the retailer. So that level of integration is much tighter.
Having those terminals on the shop floor adds incredible complexity for Flextronics.
Yeah.
From a labor perspective, through to data integrity, through to some extent Sarbanes-Oxley requirements, and even tax compliance requirements in different regions, depending on where the product is being manufactured and then shipped from.
Interesting. We're going to be scheduling a show for the new year on the effects of Sarbanes-Oxley on data integration. So I'm glad you mentioned it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an interesting subject.
Oh, it is. It is. It's a very interesting subject.
Maybe
So.
we can participate in that as well. That should be interesting.
Oh yeah, no, it's a fascinating subject, and one where you really see how much overhead there is in terms of what SOX compliance involves. But just to wrap up here, because we're starting to run short of time. Do you see direct benefits in the supply chain and in the suppliers to the approach that you're taking? Certainly for the large supply or the large vendor, such as the Flextronics, there's going to be a lot of benefit there for sure. But for that small spoke that's attached to that hub, are there any lessons that you're able to give the audience here in terms of what you've seen?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson that we've seen, I've got examples recently, is it goes back to your comment earlier about even cost. It's not the lowest cost solution, which is important.
Yeah.
It's the most valuable and the right solution for you based upon your IT requirements or lack of IT resources to some extent, budgets and platform preferences. But it's all about, for those suppliers, making the right decision on what's going to work best for them with their customer.
For sure.
They need to start, I think smaller companies need to start thinking a little bit bigger, even if they are smaller. And that doesn't mean having to have huge outlay of costs, but it means making the right investment.
Yeah.
Because you can reduce your lead times, reduce your costs, have fewer sort of unwanted manual transactions within your value chain, within your supply chain, and improve that data integrity and your compliance, then you will become a true partner to a large organization, and that opens up the opportunity to really grow your business.
Wow, and you've just itemized a whole bunch of things here that are on the table for future shows. The cleanliness of your data, the planning around the whole data integration strategy. Our last show in September, we highlighted how EDI has evolved, and one of the things that came out of that show was how complex it's become. So these are all things that I think are bang on, and food for future shows as well. So
yeah, I mean, just think about the volume of data we all manage individually these days.
Oh, it's insane. It's insane.
So we believe that we've got a very interesting model for large enterprises, and it benefits the large enterprise and enormous benefits for their trading partners as well. And we think it's a more collaborative, value-based model as opposed to a mandate. And I think that a lot of companies can benefit from it. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about it today, Robin.
Well, thanks, Andy. And to our viewers, I think there's some interesting takeaways here. I think the first thing is, as Andy's just said, you got to plan. If you don't plan, you're going to fail, and it's going to cost you an awful lot more. Price is not an indicator of quality. And as a supplier, you need to ask some hard-nosed questions of the hub as to what is the value prop for you as a supplier. And I think Andy, I can see him, shaking his head here and saying, "Yeah, for sure, for sure." So these are all things that I think are really critical. The other takeaway is that I think that the timing is very interesting for suppliers and small suppliers, the spokes, because I think that as the Forrester numbers show us, I think there's some real interest in the hubs in strengthening and tightening those supply chains. And obviously the orientation is going to vary from vertical to vertical, but I think that those three items that we just talked about, plan for the future, don't decide on price, and ask the hard-nosed questions, I think are valid right across the board. So Andy, I'd really like to thank you today for being here. It's been really interesting talking to you. Clearly a lot of food for future shows here, I can see that, and thank you. The Sarbanes-Oxley one is on the planning table. We actually have an interviewee lined up tentatively, so that should be quite interesting. So thank you today for the time. It's been very interesting, and we'll be releasing this in October. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
That was a great interview with Andy Davies of the DWG Group. Some really interesting ideas there, and clearly some ideas for some future shows. November, we will be launching our third episode, and we have a feature interview with Mark Haynes of BlueLink ERP. Mark is going to be coming on the show and talking with me about the impact of data integration from an ERP perspective, SMB perspective. So it should be pretty interesting, and I'm looking forward to interviewing Mark for the November show. Questions, comments to our Twitter feed at VL Integration TV. We like you to follow, so send us your feedback and send us your questions. Thank you, and we'll see you again in November.